So let me just start, though, with where we are as a country. I think we are in not even quite a full 30 days for our current administration. What are your thoughts on where we are?
Yeah, I'm not a scared guy. As you know, I deal with gun violence every day in Chicago. I'm extraordinarily concerned for our country, for our freedoms, for our economy, for our democracy, and for our standing in the world. And none of this is a surprise. You know, Trump is lots of things. He's never subtle. We knew what he was going to do. He's following his playbook, and it's on steroids thanks to, his co-president Elon Musk. But the world has changed. The world has shifted in the past 3-4 weeks, and not in a way that any of us, I think, can feel comfortable or confident in. And it's only getting started. And very frankly, in my personal opinion, it's going to get a lot worse.
Tell me what you mean it shifted. How has it shifted? What are you seeing?
Well, again, let's go international first. You see the vice president cozying up to the far right, Nazi-like leader in Germany. You worry about what's going to happen in the Ukraine. Folks, were angry at President Biden on the Palestinian-Israeli situation, thought for some reason that Trump might be better for them, and Trump is talking about taking Gaza and turning it into a golf course. His allegiance to Putin, we've known that forever. Again, I think he's been a Russian asset for decades. He is owned by them. And so you have, the enemy of the United States now running the United States. You look at his cabinet picks, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard or, Kennedy. It's just the people with the least qualifications. And he's very strategic. He's very intentional in this. He appoints people who know they're not qualified because that's not important to him. What's important to him is blind loyalty, fealty. And they know they're not qualified. They know the only reason they're in these positions is because Trump put them in. So they will never, ever challenge him. They will never, ever speak truth to power. They would do exactly what he wants them to do. And it's sort of a mob mentality. Whether you look at Blagojevich here, whether you look at Eric Adams in New York, Eric Adams is now owned by Trump. There's nothing that Trump can ask him to do that he won't do. Mm-hmm. This is how Trump operates.
Mm-hmm. What about half of the population, roughly, who voted for him? I mean, who bought into his mode of thinking? I mean,
yeah, it's deep, and time will tell. So last time I checked, the price of eggs are still going up. I don't know if that was a real issue or not. We'll talk about education, but he might potentially do a lot that's going to hurt a lot of kids in this country. And kids' parents, some vote Republican, some vote Democratic. If he continues to lay off folks who work on nuclear energy, if he lays off folks who help to keep our skies safe with the FAA, if some horrible things start to happen, the question is, will his base turn against him? And to date, that has never happened. He has had that cult-like following that it doesn't matter literally what he does. I would love to see, desperately love to see, just a couple Republicans have a little heart and a little courage and stand up and do what's right for their constituents. But obviously, so far, there's been a beyond deafening silence. So how this plays out, Marion, I truly don't know, and that's in part why I'm so extraordinarily concerned.
You are one of the few people who I've heard speak as forcefully as you have. Where are the other voices on this?
Yeah, I don't really have an answer to that. I don't follow this every day in the media. I'm frankly doing my work here in Chicago. I'm pretty obsessed and trying to help out on the education side where I can. And for me, this is not about Democrat versus Republican or left versus right. Trump is this extraordinary anomaly, this unprecedented force that is disrupting America and sowing chaos. And so this is not about politics or policy. This is really about whether we can preserve our democracy or not. And we're at greater risk of losing our democracy than at any time in our nation's history, frankly, since the Civil War.
Why are you speaking like this right now?
Because I think it's what I believe to be the truth, and happy to be challenged, and happy to have other folks challenge me. But it's a saying, I forget who said it, but they say the darkest place in hell is reserved for those who stay silent. And so this is not a time to be silent. This is not a time to be scared. This is not a time to, kowtow to whatever. You have to speak truth to power.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Department of Education. It has been talked about getting rid of it. I actually had a colleague of mine say, well, what does the Department of Education do anyway? Can you clarify for folks?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. First of all, Trump cannot get rid of the Department of Education unless he goes completely lawless, which might happen, and you can never say what he won't do. But to eliminate, to abolish the Department of Education, it would take 60 votes in the Senate, and that's never going to happen. What he can do is he can dismantle it. What he can do is he can really hurt children. And the really fair question is, what does the Department of Education do? And it does a number of things, but at heart, it really adds more resources to help vulnerable students. So it gives access for hundreds of thousands of children to pre-K, so that our babies can enter kindergarten ready to be successful academically and socially and emotionally. Free lunches for kids who can't afford lunch and will go all day hungry if they weren't fed during the day. Money for children with special needs, and we have lots and lots, millions of kids across the country. Again, some parents vote R, some vote D. Children who have special needs and need additional support and help. Billions of dollars comes from the federal government to ensure they have a free and fair public education. Title I money for poor kids who live below the poverty line and need some additional supports. Money for rural students. Billions and billions of dollars for Pell Grants to have the chance for, people who aren't born on third base with a silver spoon in their mouth. Many first generation have a chance to go to college. That's what the Department of Education does. And if he starts to take any of that on, the damage he will do to the American dream of getting a good education and climbing the economic ladder, the damage to democracy, and the damage to folks who actually supported him will be staggering. And it is too early to tell whether he will take that next step or not. If he simply shuffles, moves something to HHS and moves something to Treasury and moves something to Labor, that's a bunch of bureaucratic finagling that doesn't help a single child learn how to read. And Marion, we have a literacy crisis now, a reading crisis coming out of COVID. We just had the recent NAEP scores that were terrible, and we should all be, deeply, deeply concerned about that. Not a single thing, not a one word Trump has said helps one child in America better learn to read. That's what we should all be focused on together. Education should be the ultimate bipartisan and nonpartisan issue. Nothing that he has said helps a single child learn to read.
One of the things he does say is returning the point of education or the lead of education to the states. Why is that a strategy that you think works?
Yeah, well, again, Trump lies incessantly. So 90% of funding for education already comes at the local level, comes from the states and local community. About 10% comes from the federal level, and that, again, supplements those children most at risk. So to say we're returning it to the states, it's already in the states. There's nothing to return. And it's a very interesting contrast in terms of his dishonesty. One is already there, and what he's basically trying to say, his message was, let's get the federal government out. But then he does the exact opposite. You always have to look for Florida. Florida is the bellwether for this. So where are the vast majority of books that are banned in America? Where does it happen? In Florida. Where you have, trying to teach history, saying that there are benefits for slavery for the slaves. That's in Florida. Where are they trying to eliminate African American history? That's Florida. So he's actually not returning education to the states, one, because it's already there, but he's actually in a very heavy-handed way trying to whitewash history, negate the reality, the truth of America and who we are and where we come from.
So in the city of Chicago, first I want to ask you about education. I do want to ask you about cred too. But let me first ask you about the state of education in the city of Chicago. This was a department that you ran, and Pedro Martinez is already been ousted. He's still around, of course, but what are your thoughts about the way this has gone down? I mean, it's been, in my experience here, you don't hear someone get the sort of accolades from members of the city council, from principals, from teachers, anecdotally. I mean, these are people who supported him, and yet there was a real strong determination to get him out.
Yeah, I'm always about student achievement, and our goal, whether it's locally or at the state level and nationally, our goal has to be to fight for kids and fight to create opportunity. And so I just look at the data, I just look at the evidence. And coming out of COVID, where we saw this massive learning loss, and we know that the kids that fell the furthest behind were already the ones who were the furthest behind, the most vulnerable, Chicago's one of the couple cities that did the best job of helping kids catch up. coming out of COVID. You look at the progress on graduation rates. There's so much to be proud of. And if somehow Chicago was getting worse in terms of performance, then I agree the leadership team should change. But when you see Chicago outperforming other cities and helping vulnerable populations catch up, which is so much of our city's public school students are children who live below the poverty line, children who have struggled, where getting a quality education is their only way to climb the economic ladder and get a good job and go to college and hopefully enter the middle class. When you see success, where that's happening, you need to build upon that success and learn more and try and get faster. And it's just like a family. When adults fight, kids lose, and that's what we're seeing here. And it's really tragic to me. It really, it makes me really sad.
So you are a fan of Pedro Martinez?
I'm a fan of his performance. For me, none of this is personal. Pedro worked for me. I like him. I have tremendous respect. But if he wasn't getting results, this is about business. This is about helping kids learn to read. So this is not about who I like or don't like. I have tremendous respect, yes, for him as a man, but more importantly, I respect his results. I respect what he's done in terms of raising student achievement. And for that, his performance, it stands on its own.
So how do you feel about the way this city has handled this? Brandon Johnson as the mayor was basically like he's going. Do you get the sense that he is what some people call him, a puppet of the CTU?
Well, I just, for me, like, I want the mayor to be successful. Like, I want the incoming Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon in DC, I want her to be successful. I've been on record saying if she's there to try and help kids learn to read, I will do anything in my power to help. I always say education should be the ultimate bipartisan or nonpartisan issue. Here in Chicago, it's obviously almost all Democrats, not Republicans. So I just want to see a strong, vibrant school system. And I wish we could have stayed the course. That didn't happen. But I have no interest in seeing anybody fail because when adults fail at their jobs, whether it's the Secretary of Education, DC, or whether it's the mayor, where they fail, we lose, and most importantly, our kids lose. Mm-hmm. And so whatever I can do to try and help, I want to try and do that.
Let me circle back. I meant to ask you specifically about Linda McMahon and your thoughts about her. I mean, she, clearly as a Trump appointee is going to have an agenda and has already talked about some of that at her confirmation hearings. What are your thoughts so far as she's gone through that process?
Yeah, it's very interesting, Linda McMahon, and she has been, fairly criticized as having no experience in this. But I will say it's complicated with Trump. There are people with a lot more experience who would have been exponentially worse than her. You had the crazy superintendent in Oklahoma who spent all the taxpayer money buying those Trump Bibles to try and buy his way into the job. And you have the crazy Moms for Liberty folks in Florida who desperately wanted the job. The fact that he bypassed them and did Linda, again, look at his history. First term, he appointed a billionaire funder for him. Second term, he appoints a billionaire funder for him. She is less scary to me than those other alternatives. The real question is whether she will have any control or whether she'll just be one of a puppet of Trump, a minion who just takes directives from Trump and Musk. And if she can go in there and again can work to try and help kids learn to read and to create educational opportunity, I've said this very publicly, I've said this to her people, I will do anything in my power to try and support her. Right now, if you look at what's happened to date, first of all, she will be confirmed because every single one of his people are being confirmed. So let's just get past whether she should or not. She will be. The question is whether she will have any ability to do the right thing by kids. And I am extremely skeptical to think that's going to be the case. But we don't know her character. And I say, when I took an oath there to serve, you take that oath for life. And she's got to take that same oath that I took. And the question is, as you go into that, it's a weighty responsibility. Do you take that oath to serve kids and serve the country, or you take an oath of allegiance to Trump? And that's something she's going to have to search in her heart and her soul and figure out how to navigate that.
Let me again double back because I should have followed up
Yes,
as it relates to Elon Musk. You were in an administration at one time. Have you ever seen this sort of person in this position have this sort of power?
Now, this is obviously unprecedented in our nation's history. And I want to go back just to give you a little quick history on education, because education has always been a bipartisan issue in America. During the Civil War, our first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, created the land-grant colleges, which were just absolutely transformational. Eisenhower created a Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, put education, gave it a federal role. Both Bushes pushed for no child left behind law for greater accountability. Pell Grants, which I talked about earlier, transformational for our country and creating opportunity. That was President Nixon. Nixon may have done a lot of other things that weren't good. President Nixon signed that into law. IDA, Children with Special Needs, the Individual Disabilities Act, that was signed by President Ford. So the history in our nation, whether it's going back to our first Republican president or for the last 70 years, that's all Republican presidential leadership on education. So again, this is not R versus D. This is not left versus right. What Trump is doing, the assault on public education, is unprecedented in the history of our nation. And that's why I'm so concerned. That's why this is so scary.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And can you expand a little bit more on Musk and his role?
Yeah. Well, Trump is basically owes Musk, because Musk helped to buy him the election, put $250 million behind it. Musk is 10 times smarter than Trump, and he has a set of his minions, his musketeers, to do his work. And so Trump cannot control Musk, and you call Musk the co-president. He may well be basically acting as the surrogate president now, and Trump right now has shown no ability or interest in challenging that. For me, the question is, does it fall apart? And it has not fallen apart yet. It's interesting. Both of them see the government is just a way to enrich themselves. Musk wants to become the first trillionaire. Trump actually wants to beat him to become the first trillionaire. So at some point, they're both enriching themselves massively through government. It's basically a kleptocracy is what we're seeing now in our nation. The place where I think it may fall apart down the line is where Trump sees an opportunity to surpass Musk in terms of wealth. But neither one of them have any interest in serving the public. Neither one of them have our nation's interest in heart. This is all about their own personal gain. So it's a grift, it's a fraud, it's a con, and you have two con artists working together. At the same time, Musk says, I'm reducing the size of government and saving money. I'm sure you saw the other day, he's up to get a $400 million contract from government for Tesla. So what he's really trying to do is take money in education from vulnerable children to enrich himself. It's just, again, educationally mind-boggling and morally bankrupt. But that's what's happening in real time.
I'm like this, listening to you, like, oh my gosh, do you have any fear or concern about them coming at you from an attack point of view, suing you first even?
I haven't really thought about it.
You haven't thought about it? They seem to be so, at least Trump has shown himself to be litigious. And actually Musk too.
I think it's important to speak truth to power. It's important when the assault on public education, when the assault on our country, when the assault on our democracy is front and center, you have to speak up.
Can I talk a little bit about cred now?
Yeah.
I know this is your passion.
Yeah.
And I want to just talk to you a little bit about how it's going. You were supposed to hold a press conference today to really talk about, I think, some of the advances and successes.
Yeah, so we're starting our 9th year now, which is sort of staggering. We started 9 years ago with 1 room and 25 guys at extreme risk of shooting and being shot, and we now have 9 sites across the city, south and west sides. We're serving over 1,000 men, women, and teens every single year, and we have a couple dozen other partners, other community, nonprofits, social service agencies, churches, faith-based institutions working together. And I would say it's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's honestly the most heartbreaking, but it's also the most meaningful and hopefully the most significant. So coming out of the pandemic, where violence spiked tremendously, it was an extraordinarily difficult time for us. The past 3 years, 22, 23, and 24, we've seen significant reductions in violence. In our neighborhoods, we've seen between 38 and 41% reductions in violence. So a long, long way to go, not where we want to be, but the trend's the right way. And if, I don't like to talk, I don't want to jinx us, but if in 2025 we can have a 4th consecutive year of reductions in violence, that'll be the first time in 20 years that our city has had that. And so we have a chance to start to make history here. The business community has been incredibly generous in raising money to scale this work in other neighborhoods. And so next 2 or 3 years, we have a chance that we've never had to really fundamentally break through and make our city dramatically safer. Our city as a whole, but specifically on the south and west sides. And I always say we just work to give kids their childhoods back, and that's what we're trying to do. And I think we have an opportunity over the next two to 3 years to do exactly that.
Explain the model.
Yeah, so there are 5 pillars to what we do, and we're constantly evolving, and we're making lots of mistakes every single day. And I always say there's no manual, we're making it every day, but we start with a street outreach team. We have guys who come from the gang life, who still have credibility, and we go out. We won't be out tonight because it's too cold. But we go out most nights and just walk streets and just recruit men and women and young people into our program who are at extreme risk. When they come into our sites, we do a couple things. Everyone's given a life coach, and we say that experience is the best teacher, but it doesn't have to be your own experience, and you can learn from somebody else's. Everyone has a clinician, and healing from trauma is the heart of what we do. And there's a saying that hurt people, but people who are healing can not just heal themselves, but help to heal their families and the larger community. And that journey of healing is the most amazing thing to watch, and it's not linear. We have good days and we have horrible days, but to see that transformation over time, it's just incredibly powerful. We have an education team. We've had lots and lots of folks get high school diplomas. We do a big outdoor graduation every year at South Shore Cultural Center. That's amazing, and people literally never went to high school, walking across the stage with their kids, with their mother, their grandmother. It's in a real and symbolic way, they are becoming something they didn't think possible. And people spend about a year on our neighborhood sites, and then we have a jobs program, an employment and training center, and we spin people off from us to the legal economy. And I always say we can't ask people to put down the guns and change their lives if we're selling false hope. They're gonna make money one way or another, one side of the street or the other. They're gonna eat, they're gonna pay rent, they're gonna take care of their kids just like you and I do. And we have to make sure that it's doing it the right way. So we have close to 40 employers who hire at the back end. And so most people spend a year, 15, 18 months with us and then move on. And we now, because we've been at 8 years, have a big alumni program. I'm going to have lunch later this week with one of our alumni who actually met in Cook County Jail, who's worked for a law firm, DLA Piper downtown for 5 years, and actually helping on deals now. It's just like extraordinary to see. So he's taking me to lunch at his fancy law office on Thursday. I'm looking forward to seeing him.
That's beautiful. It's very holistic.
It has to be, and the more you do, the more you need to do. We have a housing program where we help with housing. We have family case managers, and the challenges that our young people have faced are extraordinary. And the more you get into it, the more you know you need to do. Yeah. And so there's a lot I would like to do that we're not doing, but it has to be holistic. It has to be comprehensive because they're faced so many challenges.
Do you get any federal funding?
We don't get any federal funding, and we don't get any public funding. So we're big advocates for it, and the state's been a fantastic partner. Governor Pritzker's been amazing in taking one piece of what we do, not funding us, but funding our partners to scale. And we would love the city and the county to do a little bit more. The federal money, at this point, you couldn't begin to think about, partnering or taking money from the current administration. So that's not going to happen. President Biden put in place the Office of Violence Prevention, which was fantastic. I haven't heard. It was a tiny office. I assume that's closed. I assume that's going away. Mm-hmm. And I desperately wish we had a federal partner, but in this work, but that's not reality.